7:34 as we roll through a record cold morning across Kansas City. The mayor of the city is here, Quinton Lucas on KCMO. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. You staying warm today?
You know what? I am staying warm. It was a cold night. I was over in Wyandotte County for the soccer match for a few minutes yesterday, meeting with some visitors from England. And, it was frigid. I was impressed by the fans, but looking forward to the warm-up for next week.
Yeah, for sure. It looked pretty crowded there. Was it max capacity or close to it?
You know what? It was vastly better than I would have ever expected. I have attended a few cold weather things. There was the Chiefs playoff game. Of course, that was a sellout because we're fans who are a little crazy, but we're great fans. But previous Chiefs regular season games I had attended, I think I went to one that was like -1 at kickoff or 0. It was probably about a 2/3 crowd. I think it was similar last night to see Lionel Messi. He scored this great goal, and it was very interesting. But we are the soccer capital of America, and we proved it again last night.
Well, take me through. We're about a year and a half away from this World Cup coming here to Kansas City, and I shared earlier this hour. I've been hearing that there are some issues happening with KC 2026, and that the Chiefs have not started the seat removals out of Arrowhead that they were supposed to begin after the AFC Championship, and there might be some money requests going on there. Where does that stand right now? Can you confirm that there are delays in that?
The leaping lizards, Pete, you're breaking stories and all of that. What I think I would say is that everyone is, working well together. Want to make sure, through all the different funding sources. So there is a substantial classic construction infrastructure project in terms of how you get Arrowhead ready, taking out seats, expanding the size of the field or the pitch, as they would call it in soccer. That work is ongoing, as well as making sure things like transportation are getting done and all that. So, maybe there are some who see that as an area of challenge. I'm actually seeing it as everybody's working together and ensuring that we can spend efficiently and effectively. And mind you, this isn't just the city bureaucracy doing it. In fact, it's not us doing it largely at all, but spending, north of $150 million to make sure all the puzzles are in place for June of 2026.
And what is, do we know yet the cost to the city for the World Cup coming here next year? Is there something that's going to be in the budget that will be line item for World Cup costs?
Direct outlays for the city of Kansas City are estimated to be $15 million. Now, as the mayor of Kansas City, I recognize that what we budgeted might not be everything. So we're working very closely to ensure there aren't a ton of extra overtime costs for the Kansas City Police Department. There aren't a bunch of extra costs for the Kansas City ATA, which the city of Kansas City, Missouri, pretty exclusively bankrolls largely, trying to make sure that at the airport things are handled. That is the work that we have the KC 2026 board for. And I will note there are a lot of regional organizations in Kansas City, some better than others. Our hope with this one, and part of why it was organized, and it's got people from Kansas and probably more people from Kansas actually, but Kansas, Missouri all around, as part of it, is because private fundraising needs to be an essential part of how we're covering this. We need to make sure that we're not just doing basically government bureaucracies in another name. That's why you go through this work. That's why you have business people involved. And that's why we at Kansas City will continue to put pressure on the private fundraising side, taxpayer savings, all those sorts of things for us long term.
And that fundraising for KC 2026 is like ongoing, right? That doesn't end anytime. It just continues on where you guys try to raise money for this deal.
Yeah, I mean, it should be ongoing. We could always stand to have more. I know that you, Pete, and Cumulus Media can write huge checks. We hope you do. But more than anything, I think, our goal is to say, how do we make sure that this isn't just something that ends up being a few white elephant projects and everybody says, all right, that was cool for a few days, what becomes of it later? Mm-hmm. We also are very sensitive to the critiques that came from the NFL draft a few years back. Now, I'm not sure all of them were fair necessarily, but to the extent we have to battle perception, there were folks that said, hey, our shops, our businesses, we thought we'd get all this business from NFL draft. Instead, everybody stayed at the Fan Fest and near the venue at Union Station. Our plan is to make sure that this World Cup is impacting as much of the region as possible. So in so many words, there's a lot that needs to be done between now and then. The biggest booster, though, that I will say so far, World Cup, has been our Republican governor, Mike Kehoe. He deserves a lot of credit. He's a St. Louis guy, a soccer guy, but he said he wants Missouri and Kansas City to shine. The biggest funder so far of this World Cup is the state of Missouri. And by the way, the biggest funder by a lot is the state of Missouri. So you can say by state, region, et cetera. Governor Kehoe, the folks in Jeff City have really stepped up to make this a success.
That's good. And I can hear the boss. She's opening her checkbook right now to make sure that Cumulus is helping out as best as we can. Hey, speaking of the city budget, I know you put this up on social media the other day. U.S. government grants to Kansas City total about $360 million. Do you have concerns that DOGE will impact a portion of that? And if so, what part of it? And what are your concerns right now, if any? Or is it political posturing?
Well, no, it's not political posturing. And as you know from our interviews, even if it leads to great battles, usually to my left after I'm on this show, I like to be realistic about what's going on, what the issues are. For us, and I've already had some folks who conducted this review for me, there are some grants, there are some applications that we may need to change and redefine. For example, there was a lot of news this week on that Ivanhoe neighborhood grant that's on the east side of Kansas City that received a cancellation notice on Valentine's Day. I disagree with that. I disagree with the government activity broadly. However, there is a cure, right? It was cut purportedly because of DEI initiatives, but a lot of people pointed out, and with this point I agree on the substance, that is just a good urban farming grant that is providing food to mothers, food to neighborhood people, regardless of race. In a grant application, because the prior administration asked them to do that, you had to say, how are you fulfilling diversity, equity, and inclusion principles? How does this work for black and brown farmers, et cetera? What needs to be adjusted now is to say, how does this just work for people who live in that neighborhood? Those people who will disproportionately be black, but nonetheless, right, you can still accomplish the same thing. What we have a lot of work to do at the city is to say, how do we make sure that we are using in as many places as possible race-neutral, gender-neutral language that suggests that really it is for everybody. A lot of people were confused and said, well, can a white mother who's in need of healthy food who happens to be at, let's say, 40th and Woodland, go to Ivanhoe for this service? The answer is yes. Maybe it wasn't clear before. I think we need to make sure that all of our programs at the city, the $350 million of it, we make that clear. I think that gets us out of the crosshairs of some DOGE initiatives, and I think that allows us to continue basic services, and that's the work that we're doing right now. It's very boring. It's very tedious. It's why I'm not tweeting as much as I usually do. But, we're going to make sure that we get ahead of it so we can help the people of Kansas City.
But I saw that the grant that the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council got really just came to be in October. So, I mean, is it really critical to keep the farmers market around to have this grant? Because as I read into it more, it only had been around for 3 or 4 months, so they can continue as operating like they were prior to the grant coming in, right?
Look, what I would say is they went through an incredibly competitive process to get it. And one of the bigger challenges, if Brother Elon and others are trying to actually make some difference, it's how long it takes after you receive the notification of a grant award to the time you have a contract to get it. So while it might have started in October, that I assume that they probably received it far before that. And so, I think and then people do make budgets, sort of planning for this spring and summer for it to be part of it and to expand a service. Sometimes you build up from there. That's something that needs to be made more efficient. Kansas City, for example, we received millions of dollars to help, improve bridges and all types of things. I don't know if those contracts are actually done yet. Those are the sorts of things where there are delays, and that does add to cost to the American taxpayer. And I think that's what we're trying to make sure we get cleared up.
Mayor Lucas is here on KCMO. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about that is more the broader picture on this whole conversation about what's wasteful spending, what's not, what's genuinely helping people that need it. Is the farmers market in the Ivanhoe neighborhood to supposedly help mothers eat healthy really essential? When I look around, on Google Maps, and there's an Aldi right there at Prospect and 39th Street. You can get a lot of healthy food there. Is it really essential? Is it the essential things that we should be doing as a federal government?
I think that's a fair question. I think what I would say first to defend the program, that was That is a grant that was passed pursuant to a law, passed pursuant to a bunch of Congress people and voters who voted them in, who said that was a priority of government. There are people right now, Pete, and I deal with this in local government. I got a lot of people who call me and say, what are you doing to make sure homeless people get off the streets in the winter? But there is a very real and 200-year legacy in this city of the fact that city government wasn't really in that business, right? We had roads, we had a police department, public works, fire, and a few other things, and collected some taxes. Is government doing too much? Maybe. I think this is what the political discourse is about. Where I would disagree with the current administration is this is the political discourse through checks and balances and the different legislative and executive prerogatives. And that's how we got here. It's not just that you can singularly slash it through some sort of unitary executive. I appreciate that debate, and I think to anybody who's wondering right now, if we see a homeless person on the street right now, should I instruct a police officer to drive by or instruct a police officer, to the extent I can, to take them to a shelter and all of that? Should they have to go to that shelter over their own will? There is a lot of question to that, and I think that's what the discussion really should be, rather than some lady who got a good program and went through probably 3 years of bureaucracy who's trying to just get some apples to like mothers who have young kids. And I don't think that lady needs to bear the brunt of our longstanding political discourse. And I will make one gratuitous point. If we're playing this game, then the president's trip to the Super Bowl and the president's trip to the Daytona 500 are pretty darn expensive too. I mean, yes, government spends a lot and does a lot. I don't have a problem with that generally, but if we're doing nickel and diming of everything and everyone in this country, then I think we need to look everywhere. And, I think that's maybe what's happening now, but I think it needs to be a broader chat.
Mayor Lucas on KCMO. So, Kansas City in particular, when you look at, what's going to happen here going forward, the $360 million, are you at all fearful that any of that is going to be cut, or are you just kind of in a wait-and-see approach right now?
Look, fearful is strong. The world has been through a lot. I've personally been through a lot in life. So, I think, nevertheless, we'll persist. But, look, I'm trying to do what I can to put belts and suspenders on things and to make sure that our programs can avoid any type of both constitutional challenge and now an executive challenge. Every time a big-time Supreme Court case comes out and says you can no longer do this, affirmative action was one such example, right? The court said you can't use race in certain areas of evaluating candidates for recruitment. We did look at city programs. We try to adapt to make sure not only adherence to the law, but avoidance of any particular insight. I do that every day, whether that be campaign finance, like has been reported recently, whether that be in classic city administration. We're going to do that now. Look, if there's one thing you can say about this administration, perhaps positively, they're pretty darn clear about what they're targeting. So we're going to try to do all we can to make sure that Kansas City is not a target. And to protect the people here who have good programs, good initiatives. We're trying to do good work each day. And that is step one in this issue. Step two is legal challenge where necessary. And, step three is maybe making some political noise. And we're going to do all of that each day. And instead of just saying, we're scared. People don't want their mayor to just be sitting around scared. They want you to do something. And that's what we're going to keep doing.
Well, we are grateful for the time as always, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Stay warm. And, next week it'll be like 70 degrees warmer than it is when we talk this week. So thank you.
This place is wild. I will see you all in Florida soon.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have a great day. We appreciate the time as always. Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.